His Excellency Rodolfo Sabonge, Secretary General, Association of Caribbean States, our esteemed featured speaker this afternoon. His Excellency Fernando Nogales Alvarez, Ambassador of Spain to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. His Excellency Wellington Dario Ben Cosme Castaños, Ambassador of the Dominican Republic to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. His Excellency Alvaro Enrique Sanchez Cordero, Ambassador of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Other members of the Diplomatic Corps, heads of regional organizations, heads of units and departments within the university and other tertiary institutions who are present here and online, the management team and staff of the ACS, other staff of diplomatic missions in Trinidad and Tobago, U.W.I and IR colleagues, Ms. Therese Lord, President of the UN Club, students, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Institute of International Relations Diplomatic Dialogue with His Excellency Rodolfo Sabonge, titled Celebrating 30 Years of the ACS and Exploring its Regional Impact and Current Goals. We wish to extend heartiest congratulations to the ACS on this significant milestone. Our deepest gratitude to His Excellency and the ACS for agreeing to collaborate on this significant event. We are grateful, Your Excellency, for this honor. And to you, the audience, online and in person, we appreciate it very much that you have taken time to join us online and in person at this event. My name is Anita Montut, and I am the Acting Director of the Institute of International Relations at the University of the West Indies. I am pleased to be the chair of this afternoon's proceedings. In keeping with the Institute's mandate, we host a variety of events on diverse issues of relevance to the international relations of the Caribbean and regional development. These include diplomatic dialogues, panel discussions, guest lectures, book launches, among others. Such events are part of our public outreach strategy and act as a bridge between the IR as an academic institution and the public, generate knowledge, contribute to policy debates, and promote our public presence. We sometimes execute these exercises collaboratively with both individuals and organizations, including the Diplomatic Corps, high-level officials, private sector organizations, research and policy bodies, national and regional governmental and non-governmental organizations, including civil society groups. Today, we are pleased to host this diplomatic dialogue by His Excellency Rodolfo Sabonge in light of the 30th anniversary of the existence of the ACS. The establishment of the ACS must be understood in the larger context of the Caribbean's political economy. At the end of the 1980s, in light of the global challenges, particularly globalization and regionalization in other parts of the world, as well as regional and hemispheric events, Caribbean leaders decided to take stock of the status of the region to inform its future direction. The West Indian Commission, mandated with this task among many other proposals, recommended a twin-track strategy of deepening and widening regional integration for boosting the Caribbean's developmental agenda. The proposal for deepening gave birth to the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, and widening the Association of Caribbean States. Today, we are here 30 years on to reflect on its impact and current and future goals. Having said that, I would like to introduce our very distinguished featured speaker, Ambassador Sabonge. Rodolfo Sabonge is an expert in strategic foresight, market research, and competitive intelligence in logistics, transportation, maritime development, and ports. During more than 50 years, Sabonge led the areas of planning, marketing, and business development of the Panama Canal Authority. During his tenure at the Panama Canal, Sabonge led the transition planning of the transfer of the canal from the U.S. to the Panamanian Government, and later led the demand, market, and economic impact studies that justified the expansion of the Panama Canal. He graduated from the University of Notre Dame, Indiana as mechanical engineer, continued with graduate studies in business administration at the University of Miami, Florida, and has a master's degree in maritime development from the School of Law, University of Panama. He completed an executive program conducted by Stanford University and the University of Singapore, and a program on sustaining competitiveness taught by Michael Porter at Harvard Business School. Currently, he directs his own practice and is external advisor to the McKinsey Corporation. He's also a research professor at the Institute of Canal and International Studies at the University of Panama. In the past, he was a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on Logistics and Supply Chain. Recently, he held the creation and establishment of the IMO's Maritime Technology Center for Latin America. Currently, His Excellency Rodolfo Sabonge holds the post of the 7th Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States, an intergovernmental organization comprised of 25 member states, 10 associate members from the region known as the Greater Caribbean. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to invite His Excellency to deliver our feature address for this afternoon. It is an honor, Ambassador. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I just have to say something about my short bio. Ever since I started working as the Secretary General, I'm no longer a consultant, although I am kind of a consultant for the ACS, as you will see. Okay, Dr. Anita Montaut, Acting Director, Institute of International Relations, University of the West Indies. Distinguished members of the Association of Caribbean States, ambassadors, high-level officials and representatives of the diplomatic corps, professors, lecturers, and students of the Institute of International Relations and the University of the West Indies, distinguished and honorable online participants, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Let me begin with a heartfelt thanks to the University of the West Indies and the Institute of International Relations, longtime ACS collaborations and supporters for hosting this forum. I take the opportunity to extend thanks to you all for joining this afternoon for what I hope will be, beyond a lecture, a lively exchange on the Association of Caribbean States 30 years after its founding on 24th July 1994, and looking forward 30 years hence. I would have rather liked to get started right away, but I am told that since there is a photo of me in the promotional poster, I have to say a few words to contextualize this occasion and kick off what I hope will be an engaging forum, maybe even a debate. It is, of course, extremely useful to share with you the events of 30 years past. Much has been accomplished and hopefully a lot learned, but I think it considerably more interesting and meaningful to anticipate what the next 30 years will be like. And in this, I hope you all are be active, passionate participants. Popular culture associates 30th anniversary with two symbols. The color green, a color that symbolizes nature, life, earth, growth, but also hope. And the pearl. Can I have the technical person here? That's the question. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. The pearl, a precious gemstone prized for its beauty, formed when a foreign particle of irritant enters the shells of the clams at the bottom of the ocean and lodges itself therein, creating a hard, illustrious spherical mass of high value, great rarity, and worth to humans. A pearl is associated with a unique type of wealth, not riches, but wisdom. I find these two symbols are extraordinarily apt to the ACS in its current state. A green pearl, comprising 25 sovereign states and 10 associate territories. Our association took the particles of every state and territory washed by the Caribbean Sea and overcoming the irritations and agitations caused by inherent and inherited asymmetries, historical and ongoing upheaval, and sea changes of every sort imaginable, from conflict to COVID to climate change, and forced a new pearlesque concept, that of the Greater Caribbean. A real new world where continental lands, isthmuses, and islands, archipelagos, bound to each other by the Caribbean Sea, would henceforth be called by our own name, not West Indians, as lost explorers called us, not American, or the backyard of Americas, as others would have us, but Caribbean, as our shared native ancestral tribes called us, not small islands, dispersed and separated, but great, great ocean states. The convention signed in Cartagena, the Indias, Colombia, on 24th July 1994 was a pact amongst these great Caribbean states to, firstly and foremost, protect and persevere the sea by which they are called. Secondly, promote and consolidate the enterprise conducted on the sea trade, transport, and sustainable tourism in furtherance of the regional blue and green economies that the sea enables. And thirdly, but by no means lastly, strengthen the cultural ties of the region. Over the next hour or so, hopefully it's within the 45 minutes, we will consider some introductory remarks relating to strategy. Then we will do a historical review of the origins of the association, the context of its creation, and the intent of its architects. We will also examine the institutional arrangement of the ACS and its key achievements and challenges up to the present time. And finally, we will examine the opportunities and imperatives that lie ahead for the ACS if it is to continue to add value for its member states at this juncture of history and into the future as the Greater Caribbean not just continues, but ramps up its pursuit of sustainable and inclusive development in the face of a rapidly evolving world reality. As it was said during my introduction of my bio, my specialty is strategy. So as I was preparing this presentation and this lecture, I was looking at really what was going on from the very beginning. And this was essentially the essence of a strategic plan. So to reflect on what strategy is, the dawn of a strategy sprung from the need of people to defeat the enemy. The first treaties Okay, the first treatises that discuss strategy are from the Chinese during the period of 400 to 200 BC. I'm sure you must have heard of the Sun Tzu, The Art of War, written in 400 BC. But planning, which is really what was going on in those days, involves a study of the strengths and weaknesses of oneself and of the enemy. However, we also need to know the terrain and the climate to guarantee victory. And I want you to reflect on this as we go along this presentation. However, strategy is a deliberate search for a plan of action, taking into consideration the external and internal factors so that one can develop a distinct competitive advantage and compound on it. For any organization, the search is an iterative process that begins with the recognition of where you are, what you have done now, and where you want to go. So this was basically the premise of what was going on in 1989, from 1989 to 1992. The Association of Caribbean States was created as part of a plan of action that resulted from the extensive analysis performed by the West Indian Commission during that period. And to tell you the truth, also as a researcher and also a practitioner in the area of strategy, I would strongly recommend that the university takes a close look at Time for Action, the report of that commission, but not to see what was going on only, but to compare with what is going on now. Because that gap is really what makes the difference as to what organizations like the ACS will be able to do in the future. Now, how extensive was this analysis? And I'm just going to go through some of the titles because this is a 500-page report, 522-page report that I'm sure has more than that in all the working papers that must have come together before the final report came. In my professional life, in doing planning, strategic planning, I have never seen anything like this. This report included almost everything that you can think of. I mean, when you look at that, and I have highlighted some of the items in which all of a sudden they were shaping the Association of Caribbean States. You know, everything else that I have not highlighted was, you know, elements that they were analyzing very deeply. So in all the chapters, if you really want to look at the history in those days of what they were looking at, but this report to me is the richest document that you can have, and it would be very important if you were able to replicate it, because it looks at almost every corner of what CARICOM countries were facing in those days. But like I said, only the yellow ones have to do with the premises that would eventually justify the creation of the ACS. Basically, you start also looking at some of the areas of focal areas of the ACS when they were looking at the problems that they were facing. I'm just going to go very fast so you can at least have a flavor of the depth of this report. Everything that you can think of. What does it take to do something like this now? Because seriously, if you see what the world they were afraid of then, that I'll show you, right now we are 10 times worse. Okay? But this is really the most important part of strategic planning. analyzing the context, the terrain, the climate. So we go back, we say, yes, check. They did a very good job at looking at the strengths, weaknesses, oneself, and the enemy. And you will find out who was the enemy. But however, they also looked at the terrain and the climate. And this is the part that I want to move to next. Okay. Let us therefore begin at the very beginning, understanding the historical, political, and economic context of Latin America and the Caribbean around the time the ACS was conceptualized, or rather, just before. Why did our past leaders deem it necessary for an organization like the ACS to be formed? And what was taking place in the Caribbean at the time? Interestingly, these were the very questions raised in 1992 West Indian Commission Time for Action report. The authors contextualized the reason for its existence. The reason CARICOM leaders had issued them a commission of mere 3 years. 3 years. This is just to write the Foresight analysis, 3 years. These are the things that they were finding. Extraordinary changes in the world enforce the need to act together with urgency. Highlight urgency. Change was fast enough before, but in the short time since the Grand Anse Declaration, which was basically July 1989, the international context has been utterly transformed. Between 1989 and 1992. Yes. Yes, and that was exactly, you will see later. It's one of the things that they were seeing. Okay. No, perfect. Now, the next paragraph, listen to this. Communism has been seen to fail. Command economies are being discarded everywhere. And the adoption of market mechanisms is increasingly seen as the utmost test of how to run economies properly. Some of you may not be that old, but I was living that period of privatization and everything that was taking place during those Reagan years and Margaret Thatcher and so on. Now, the Soviet Union has disintegrated. The Cold War has ended, and it is now a world of one. Just think about that. In those days, one. Not two military superpowers, with all that implies for the shaping of the new order. The European Union Commission has taken crucial steps towards establishing a common currency and single market and achieving closer political integration, and the EEC and the EFTA proposed coming together in 1993 to create an even wider consolidation market of 400 million. Remember those days? Okay. The Uruguay round of GATT, does anybody even remember what GATT was? Okay. GATT talks continue with no sure benefit and holding a number of serious potential threats for countries like our own. I can tell you that a lot of other countries in this region were feeling exactly the same thing, but nobody had gone and done this kind of analysis. The USA has gone rapidly beyond the free trade agreement with Canada to begin negotiating a similar accord with Mexico in the context of a proposed hemispheric free trade area in which our place as yet as uncertain, to say the least. How many of you remember ALCA? Okay, so, but these are the things that really made the urgency and the uncertainty something critical. Canada, meanwhile, is engaged in a debate on constitutional change, the outcome of which could have significance for the Caribbean community. On the other hand, on the other side of the world, but in these days, that phrase means infinitely less than it did not a long time ago. Japan continues its march towards economic and financial preeminence. Where is Japan now? You know, this is geopolitics and geoeconomics snapshot, but it is important for what happened later. In our immediate neighborhood, change, including the prospect of even more rapid change, is the order of the day. Almost every month, it seems we observe new initiatives towards closer cooperation. We have had the establishment of the Group of Three, involving trade cooperation between Colombia, Mexico, and Venezuela. The launching of Mercosur, a grouping of the southern countries of Latin America, and the commitment of the Andean Pact countries to consolidate their grouping into single market by 1995. In the immediate CARICOM context, closer economic and trade relations with Latin American countries are being developed. Venezuela has offered one-way free trade to the community and has joined the Dominican Republic in applying to join CARICOM. How is that going? I mean, it's so great to look at the past and then look at what is going on right now. In Guyana, this is another one. The road being constructed between Georgetown and Brazil signals an era of closer connections between that great Latin American country and ourselves. Where is that road? Work in progress. 30 years later. Guatemala's recognition of Belize. What? Guatemala's recognition of Belize opens up new possibilities of constructive relations between CARICOM and Central America. This is like Back to the Future, right? Okay. So as you can see, the context was that of uncertainty and fear. Fear for the lack of scale in terms of influence in front of huge economic and geopolitical power changes. So the report of the 1992 West Indian Commission was the precursor of what today could be labeled a strategic plan exercise. Now, let's take a look at some of the very specific issues that were affecting the Caribbean itself. From the same report, I have extracted the following quotes regarding functional cooperation, and keep that phrase, functional cooperation. Strengthening links between its sea-separated countries is an obvious priority for CARICOM. It has not been for want or trying that progress in this respect has been disappointing. After Federation collapsed, a regional shipping council took over the operation of the Federal Palm and the Federal Maple. Any of you remember that? No? Okay. But maybe you remember this one. In 1976, WISCO was established to serve as the vehicle for intergovernmental cooperation in shipping. Since then, the corporation has been plagued by problems, management shortcomings, operating deficits, subscription shortfalls, contradictory policy directives, and at the time of writing this report, it had ceased operations temporarily. Oh, anybody remember Wisco? No? I do. Okay. Yet Wisco, they claim, has provided a scheduled service for moving goods around the region not otherwise available, sustaining this basic service and considerably improving it, whether in government or private hands, must remain a community priority. 30 years later, we're now talking about a ferry service between Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Suriname, Barbados, and we have maybe less shipping services in this region than 30 years ago. And that applies also to air, but we'll get to that. The strengthening of air transportation links is also a priority in this respect. It is a little praised achievement that all member states, CARICOM, except the Bahamas and Belize, I wonder why, enjoy frequent, regular, and reliable air services through the combined operations of BWIA and LIA. You remember LIA? Okay. Again, 30 years ago. This is a snapshot, but you can think of this as a moving picture now. Okay. It may be a major disappointment that one common air carrier has not emerged in the region. Any change? We're having in the Dominican Republic soon a air connectivity conference. Okay. But the degree of cooperation achieved and the standards of service provided are not negligible. Okay, we can continue, but regional prospects in those days, such far-reaching international considerations lead us to focus on the Caribbean itself, where we must muster our available resources, where we must shape our responses to get the best deals ever. CARICOM and the wider Caribbean, at once, we were confronted by a fundamental question. What Caribbean? And this is still the same question. What Caribbean? They were asking at that time. It is a question we have been urged to answer on numerous occasions during our consultations. During those 3 years, the Commission actually went around the whole region several times and met with everybody. They met even with the churches. I mean, when I saw the program, I couldn't believe how intensive that program was. And the consensus during these consultations strongly advocate that CARICOM seek much closer cooperation with sister Caribbean countries in finding a place for ourselves in the new world order. The conclusion we have reached is that the process of deepening CARICOM integration and the process of widening regional partnerships are not irreconcilable strategies. This is key to the creation of the ACS. We remain aware that a too rapid or ill-considered widening of CARICOM could adversely affect the integration process itself. So you can see here a dichotomy. How to achieve the integration with the rest of the Caribbean without losing the control of the CARICOM member states. This is a dichotomy that has still not been resolved. In fact, right now, there are still discussions as to who can really become not members, but associates of CARICOM. But we recognize just as insistently that forging and bringing to bear in world affairs requires widening. So, a wider Caribbean sphere of influence is essential both as a valid consummation in its own right and for enlarging the gains of our own deeper integration. Listen, because this next part is critical. And I was looking for a figure to show what happens when you have that kind of double strategy. Because this dual track strategy we foresee producing circles of partnership that start with our own West Indian family, encompasses the extended family of the non-English speaking Caribbean islands, and involves a yet wider circle of closer relations with countries of the Caribbean basin, including South and Central American countries. There was a dual strategy here. Let's keep looking for our own integration, but at the same time expand. If you are in the corporate world, you can really not do this both at the same time. But of course, this is the diplomatic world. So maybe you can. Because at the time, this was the premise on which the ACS was created. But we will come to that a little bit later. I want you to pause and ask you, 32 years later, have this connectivity and other issues been resolved? Okay, I see many no. Now, consider the trends, changes, and concerns raised by the West Indian Commission, as I have just quoted. They are now history, but at the time, they were contemporary concerns that occupied CARICOM's leaders to such an extent that they created a commission that would provide an urgent response. Urgency is associated with two things: importance and time. Urgency is importance requiring swift action. Hence the report's title, A Time to Action. The changes identified by the Commission as requiring not just that CARICOM, but that Latin America and CARICOM act together with an urgency, were a mix of considerations, some threats and some opportunities, a world with just one superpower, a consolidated European market moving towards a single market and economy, USA and Canada seeking closer ties with Mexico, and the group of three and Latin American countries in general pursuing greater trade, Guyana and Brazil building that connectivity, that road. So I would like to add some key considerations necessary to defining a truly Caribbean identity. Outreach membership was premised primarily on shared historical experience. And listen to this because this is also something critical. Notably, that the colonialism, which bound countries by established language, judicial, economic, and importantly, trade and transport culture, inherited from former colonial masters, Britain, France, and Spain. I just want you to think what was really in common here. You are talking about the colonies that came from totally different powers in all respects. Okay, that of course did not connect the region, but connected the different sub-regions firmly to Europe. Europe, in those terms, is very heterogeneous. You are not going to find this as a homogeneous colonial derivative. Okay, identity, therefore, was part based on geography, but especially based on shared historical experience. What was really the shared historical experience? An inherently flawed basis for a region looking to its own future. Now, their main focus on inception was promoting economic integration as a means of fostering development, with special emphasis on the inclusion of small island developing states, where the British colonies were included, and which advocated for special and differential treatment and considerations to integrate into the global geo-economic and geopolitical economy as sovereign states. None of the entities at their time of creation focused specifically on the concerns of the globally changing climate and environment and increasing scale of devastation being caused by disasters. This is quite important. That report, as I mentioned here, only had 14 pages of the 520 pages devoted to the environment. So that kind of shows how much it was really a critical issue in those days. Okay. Now, that maybe is a good reference because we can also see when this whole thing started with the first UN climate change conference that took place in 1995. As I go through this again, think of these 30 years, how much that has changed. Maybe if you were to do this report right now, more than half of it will be devoted to the environmental impact of climate change. Okay. The commission report in its chapter 11. Look, I showed you at the beginning all the chapters. On shaping external relations, numeral 5, recommended the widening integration could be done through an association of Caribbean states. And this is, again, critical. Anchored on CARICOM and promoted by CARICOM. So this is a brainchild of CARICOM from the commission's report to what actually happened later, because as you know, the headquarters were established in a CARICOM country. And this was stated in the report as the largest integration movement in the Caribbean. We have a responsibility to take the initiative. If we don't create the new space, CARICOM will be the only vehicle for the association of the Caribbean countries with us. CARICOM itself is not, in all respects, the most appropriate vehicle for those relationships, which will need to be tailored to a great variety of situations. CARICOM countries will have to be individual members in the new association. So that kind of stated who were going to be the members. It was not going to be CARICOM. It was going to be CARICOM members. We see this association of Caribbean states as being functionally active in an integration sense, not a mere symbol of Caribbean aspiration for unity. We believe that it should be the means of our creating with new, wider Caribbean special trading and functional cooperation. Again, I want to stress the word, functional cooperation, on terms that are to be negotiated, terms which will recognize the relative weakness of CARICOM economy. They were just setting or paving the road for that to happen later. Okay. There is a wide area of functional cooperation which could be developed within the ACS as a precursor to deeper relations among member countries. Joint ventures, listen to this. This was really part of their plan. Joint ventures between and among ACS countries and the widening of air, sea, and telecommunications links. So in those days, digital was not maybe a word, but telecommunications was already part of that strategy, covering the entire Caribbean and the littoral area among them. But so too are others in the variety of fields like tourism. So this is the shaping of what we have now as the ACS. The convention establishing the ACS was therefore an opportunity to, in the first place, connect and thereafter identify the synergies among the insular, rimland, Caribbean, and beyond in addressing challenges best managed at the regional level, regardless of the historical colonial ties of their existing groupings, language barriers, ties, and even political status. This is a vision. And I'll talk about visions later, but this is a vision that is not going into detail as to how or where. Eventually, the convention took part of that vision, and that is where the implementation part comes in. And I'll have a very last slide that I'll show why strategies fail. But part of it has to do with implementation. Okay. Now, the convention, you can read it directly, created an organization for consultation, cooperation, and concerted action. Those are big words that need to be, explained in detail, and maybe implementation gets lost in the implementation of those words. Whose purpose is to identify and promote the implementation of policies and programs designed to harness, utilize, and develop the collective capabilities of the Caribbean region to achieve sustained cultural, economic, social, scientific, and technological advancement. The convention included things that we don't really have right now in the structure of the ACS. I just want to point that out. So the vision was wider. The scope was wider. Sustained cultural, economic, social, scientific, and technological advancement. Develop the potential of the Caribbean Sea through interaction among member states and with third parties. Promote an enhanced economic space for trade and investment with opportunities for cooperation and concerted action to increase the benefits which accrue to the peoples of the Caribbean from their resources and assets, including the Caribbean Sea. Establish, consolidate, and augment institutional structures and cooperative agreements responsive to the various cultural identities, development needs, and normative systems with the region. This is, again, vision stated in the convention. Now, of course, the entities strictly operated areas of intervention were strategically selected to tightly circumscribe the entity scope and purpose of intervention. And this is critical. I mean, whenever you have a strategy, first thing that you will need is an organization to implement that strategy. So the first challenge was really to put together an organization that had the tool, the structure to be able to accomplish what was said at the beginning. So in a way, the purpose was so that the ACS would bridge and connect Latin America and the Caribbean conceptually by no longer using the sea as an adjunct to the Latin America and the Caribbean, but rather the protagonist was the Caribbean integration. So in this particular organization, we should not even talk about Latin America or Caribbean states. we are really all the greater Caribbean. The ACS would pursue cooperation in areas that connected the Latin American and Caribbean economically, environmentally, and physically in the soft areas of culture, people, and environment, and the hard area of transport for better trade and tourism, then and now, the mainstay of nearly all ACS members' economy. Okay, so the organization was created with 4 subgrouping. The region was established, and you can see in the colors the different subgrouping. But to go one by one, you have the CARICOM subgrouping with all the member states, the Central America subgrouping with all the member states, including El Salvador, that has very little to do with the Caribbean. The group of 3, the G3, that I mentioned before, it existed before the ACS. Some people thought that the G3 was created because of the ACS. And then you have the non-group subgrouping. I still have not been able to find the history on that, why it was called the non-group, but maybe Dominican Republic knows. But here we have Panama, Dominican Republic, and Cuba. Now, I want to focus on this because interestingly, as time went by, we had other organizations that were evolving too. And SICA included now the Dominican Republic as well as Panama, because Central America at the time was not part of SICA. So now we have another subgrouping that includes 2 of these non-group. The only one that is not there is Cuba. Okay. And then we have associate members. And this is really an important challenge that we deal with every day. Associate members are territories that are not independent. And therefore, their representation sometimes comes dual from the mother country, in the case of French territories, and in the Netherlands, in the case of Dutch territory. And that, of course, establishes all kinds of challenges, because associate members don't have necessarily the same rights as member states. But that is something that also needs to be addressed. Now, the focal areas, again, were described or defined also within the agreements and within the convention. So these are all what I call functional areas that don't necessarily require political participation. The preservation and conservation of the Caribbean Sea, cooperation and resource mobilization is a directorate that was modified a few years ago because they saw the need to have someone specifically focused on cooperation, disaster risk reduction, trade and economic external relations, transport, sustainable tourism. So the ACS is very limited in its scope and the areas in which it should focus. This is not, a lot of people call on us asking for all kinds of things: security, health, education. The ACS is limited to this area. Okay. Sorry. And that institutionally has been developed through 3 directorates that are in the organization chart. As you can see, that these directors cover those focal areas, and they also cover the special committees in which member states can participate. Okay, now we can move into some of the ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo está? Some of the key achievements. Okay. The organic life of the association revolves around a formal yearly ministerial council, a summit of heads of states and government, which take place around every 3 years. And we also have special committee meetings, sometimes one, sometimes two a year. And each special committee meeting has to do with the specific topic that they cover. Now, the challenges to have over 30 years being considerable in varying languages, vast differences in fiscal size, geographies, resources, political constitutions, and governance arrangements, as well as inherent and inherited vulnerabilities, have rendered efforts to consult, cooperate, and act concertedly extraordinarily difficult. But the ACS has been creative, developing mechanisms and producing tangible and intangible development dividends, intended to the benefit each and every member. And I'm going to mention some of them. The ACS governance structure ensures the possibility and responsibility of all members, regardless of size, to be represented. So you remember we were talking about the asymmetries in geography, in population, in economic GDP and everything. Each of our member states, regardless of size, has the same right to participate in the discussions and to vote. And they also, everything is by consensus, so that maybe the smallest country can veto or object what everybody else is agreeing to. We also have, and this is part of the achievement because, yes, sorry. We lost some. The ACS places considerable emphasis on South-South cooperation as a means of providing support to less resourced members through technology transfer from more resource ones, with Cuba and Mexico being examples of states which continuously give what they have in terms of technical support and other kind of support to fellow member states. The ACS also innovates special partnerships in the pursuit of relevant and effective cooperation. A prime example being the Sandy Shorelines Project, which monitors and addresses coastal erosion in the region, and which brought together beneficiary ACS member states, the financial support from South Korea, an important AC observer state, and the technical expertise of Cuba, an important ACS member with the technical capability to lead and execute that project. So strongly has the partnership been and friendship between Korea and ACS that right now they are looking at the opening of an oceanographic center in the ACS states, one of the Caribbean states. And we just signed this week an MOU to bring Korean interns to participate in the ACS Young Professionals Program. As I said, and this is also part of the achievement because this has been growing, this list has been growing with time, and observer states are really key in the diplomatic venues that we have, because these observer states are invited to all our ministerial councils and our meetings, and they are able to bring to our individual members a lot of ways to have bilaterals and have direct contributions or donations from them. So to us, I think that this is one of the biggest assets. Every time that we have a meeting of ministers or a meeting of presidents, that these observers are also able to come. And that is really where the diplomatic ties eventually lead into economic ties also. We also have observer organizations in the same way that I mentioned before, the observers. Observer organizations are also directly involved. And here we have the European Union, one of them, and some of the banks. We have added in this tenure of mine some more that I don't see in this list, but we had the CDB and CAF. Those two were added recently. And of course, we have the founding observer organizations with whom we deal directly, and we participate in most of their fora. Now, you may ask, and how is it that the work of the association in championing the Caribbean Sea and its recognition by the United Nations as a special area in the context of sustainable development is not listed in these top achievements? And that is because despite several resolutions passed in the UN on the matter, the work of having our Caribbean Sea, the cornerstone of our civilization, recognized, is still ongoing. And I'll explain a little bit why. Ongoing and threatened by the climate change and its effects, by sargassum, microplastics, pollution, everything that is affecting all the ecosystems, rising sea level, temperature. The ACS, at its just completed 29th Ministerial Council meeting, created a subcommission just to address the effects of sargassum. But like the other outstanding undertakings of the ACS to connect the Greater Caribbean, progress on this issue has been painfully slow. Unlike on that issue, requires a more concerted and concrete undertaking to act in concert with our mutual trust, with more stakeholders, and in more coordinated fashion to achieve results. This is one of the challenges that I'm going to speak about in a couple of minutes, because to us, what is difficult as the ACS is to deal with organizations that are not structured like we are. We're dealing with most of the international organizations that deal with either CARICOM or deal with SICA or deal with individual countries. But their structure is not like ours. So they have difficulty in dealing with an organization that combines two and sometimes even three groups with which they deal. And that includes development banking, includes observer states also, but includes observer organizations. This has been our experience, for instance, with the European Union. When we deal with the European Union, they tell us how they are structured. I just came back from a meeting at the OECD. It's the same thing. I had a meeting with IDB. Said, well, some of your countries we deal from Washington, some of your countries we deal from Barbados, some of your countries we deal from, and they don't talk to each other. So, but in this particular instance, regarding the designation of the Caribbean Sea, I'll show you a map that shows how territorial seas are distributed. So you can see, trying to get all of us in agreement. And I have to say that not all these countries have signed, not even UNCLOS. So when you're looking at this region, you have some countries have not ratified conventions, some have, that have to do with pollution, that have to do with shipping, that have to do with almost everything that you can think of. So if we don't even have a homogeneous region where all these conventions have been signed and agreed to, it will be very difficult to designate the Caribbean Sea as a special zone. Because the first and foremost has to come from agreement on territorial sea and the economic zone, the exclusive economic zone that was established. You really need to understand what are the rules of that game. And you can look at, for instance, at MARPOL, which is an IMO convention that has to do with pollution of ships. And many of these countries have not signed MARPOL in all the annexes. So again, this is a big challenge because it's all about rule of law. The other challenge that we face is the amount of mechanisms that have been created in this region, where some of our members participate in many other mechanisms, as you can see. So they are all dealt at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So you have a Minister of Foreign Affairs with someone having to do with some of these mechanisms and somebody else dealing with other mechanisms. Now, just to give you an idea, and I'll talk about it later, but our next chair is Colombia. Yesterday, we were finding out that Colombia is going to be chairing, it is six of these mechanisms, including CELAC. So you can see, and every mechanism has a different scope and also even a different convention and different objectives. So this is a challenge for us. Many of our countries, you can see ACS is that shaded area, but many of our countries are also members of other things. Okay. So I mentioned trust and coordination because sometimes even the will to work together must be defended and not diluted. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. In a world of competing interests where the struggle for relevance is real, there is a fine line between complementing and competing. And there is a tried and tested technique for converting the one into the other. It is called divide and rule, an age-old colonial strategy. In my time as Secretary General, I have come upon this time and time again, where member states are lured into supporting new partnerships, initiatives, or bodies whose mandates compete with those of this association, which they own and which they built. And one of them that I'd like to mention, if you know of it, it's CMLE. This is an environmental group that is trying to create a secretariat that in a way emulates a lot of what we do in our Caribbean Sea Committee. So this is right now ongoing. In fact, they are meeting today in Antigua and Barbuda. And they are trying to get signatures from member states that are attending them for the creation of that secretariat. So as part of my statutory responsibilities, I am bound to remind and alert that ultimately the main line of defense is the solidarity of our member states and associates, their watchfulness, their trust in each other, their honest investment participation in the association. No Secretary General, Director, or Chief Executive, however committed, effective, or talented, can defend what they have to build. This sacred responsibility lies with them. And I have another slide where I show the reasons why strategies fail. One of them has to do with the patrons of the organization, providing the support it needs. Part of this process of defense entails the seemingly mundane, paying dues, participating in meetings to ensure quorum and representative views, stating positions for the record, assuming responsibility for the governance of the organization, contributing to decision-making. This is a livelihood of the ACS. And you will see reports and reports of our meetings. And basically, the role of the Secretariat is to be able to have successful meetings, attract all our participants, participate as much as they can. Equally important, however, is ensuring constant growth by demanding more and proposing more, ensuring that their association consistently evolves and adds the value required to consolidate the greater Caribbean civilization. And this is one of the achievements of the ACS over its 30 years, and it brings to the title of this presentation, From Time of Action to Concerted Action. One of my principal responsibilities as Secretary General has really been to take the ACS image and branding to world events, because it doesn't matter what we tell ourselves. We really need to make sure that others see us as what we say we are. The ACS has been able over its 30 years and at its highest policy making and lowest operational level to test and improve itself. This requires not just trust, but courage. Through a series of summits and declarations and legal agreements since the creation of by convention, ACS members have called for and implemented a program of revitalization, altered the nature of its plan of action, required and processed an audit of the main operational organ, the Secretariat, and are now mature, might I say, brave enough to go back to the very beginning to again probe and test, calling for the drafting of the first ACS strategic plan that will map the current context of regional integration in view of a radically changed reality to what existed 30 years ago, and chart a way forward, a vision, a mission of an ACS fit to purpose. This is what we have right now in our agenda. This is what was approved in our last summit in Guatemala and reiterated again in the most recent Ministerial Council meeting that was held in Suriname. We are also trying to coordinate better with other regional organizations, specifically those that are closer to us, like CARICOM, SICA, and CELA. And believe it or not, this was the very first meeting, July 7th, 2023. So we're looking at the challenges, but we're not just watching them go by. We're trying to also face them and solve them and look for the future and try to get a better fraction of that. So looking forward, I go back to my very first slide, you remember, where I was explaining strategy is a deliberate search for a plan of action. But what's in red is what's most important. When I first came to the ACS, my first question was, where is the last strategic plan? Where is the last vision that you drafted? Everybody looked at me like, what is that? And the truth is that there has never been one other than the very first one. CARICOM, for instance, has had already 3 exercises of that nature. And that is exactly why I have put more emphasis since my very first meeting. Our very first Ministerial Council said we need a new strategic plan because of everything that has changed. That terrain, that climate is totally different. And our challenges need to be adequated to the new realities. And that is one of the things that we are going to be doing. So we're looking forward at that strategic planning exercise. We are also going back and understanding or trying to read of some of the questions that you saw. I don't know how many of you read the book, The Caribbean on the Edge. Well, in that book, Professor Duquesne, on page 39, under the title, On Changing Roles and Changing World, it's a very contemporary book. That's why I quote it. The ACS is like a medicine in search of a disease. It's looking for its own platform. The stage is perhaps set for the emergence of a different notion of the regional state as a vehicle for creating political and negotiating space in the international arena. We're going back again to this functional responsibility. I mean, we're not going to break away or eliminate the sovereignties of any of our member states. But we need to resolve some problems together. And the problems that I have addressed and I looked at 20 years, 30 years ago, that they were looking at are still there. Connectivity. You cannot have intra-regional trade. You cannot have tourism if you don't have connectivity. And now it's not only physical connectivity, but it's also digital connectivity. And this has to be looked at as a regional problem because transportation is based on geography. It also looks at economies of scale in terms of population, in terms of size and scale. But that doesn't mean that you're going to forget about geography. Distances set a basis for transportation, where you're going to establish your hubs and so on. So he warned in page 48 of the book, is there scope for non-sovereign regional state? That's what I'm talking about. I don't think there is. There isn't, because of so many differences that were identified then. You know, the political regime, the judicial regime, the cultural differences are too vast. I don't think that we can just simply forget about those. We really need to look for ways to do a regional solution for operational problems. Okay. The hurdles, historical and contemporary, facing a regional state in the Caribbean are huge, which has led to the establishment of surrogate bodies and associations to provide platforms for diplomatic leverage. The Association of Caribbean States is one such creation, shifting from orthodox protest to diplomacy towards a more affirmative stance that allows for greater cooperation in building resilience. And on our side, we don't really see that as the truth. The ACS is not a medicine in search of a disease. The diseases are there. And to deny that the diseases are there is just being blind. We are a medicine that requires further research and retrofitting to cure two diseases that are widely metasizing environmental vulnerability and lack of connectivity. Those are the two main issues that we have to focus on. The ACS is already uniquely placed to foster cohesion amongst its members, to rally them into a regional state, which, however, does not threaten its sovereign part. It is an apolitical, diplomatic, consensus-based cooperation entity created to deliver public goods best delivered at the regional level, environmental integrity, and physical, digital, and cultural connectivity. It is already structured to deliver medicine through a powerful triple C dose of consultation, cooperation, and concerted action that can enable healthier trade, tourism, and people connections. But it has yet to perfect the modes of delivery. Its consultative processes are effective through slow but on implementing cooperation and concerting action in its weak. It is weak. So we really have not figured out the way to attract cooperation because of what I said before. Those development banks and all the other institutions that provide cooperation are not structured like we are. So what we see in the region basically is cooperation going directly to countries in a bilateral fashion or to subgrouping that are not necessarily the ways to solve these problems. Somehow, the ACS inherited the Achilles heel of CARICOM, an implementations deficit, which was 30 years ago there. It is again in Professor Dukeran's book. The problem of implementation is there. The richly consulted and consensual ACS plans of action, particularly the current and first 6-year plan of action, reflect an in-depth understanding of the needs of the region, and ACS leaders are indeed as established in the 2023 Declaration of Antigua Guatemala. The Antigua Guatemala Declaration resolved to promote and efficiently and effectively implement the ACS Plan of Action 2228 as a flagship product of the revitalization process to achieve greater resilience to threats and greater preparedness to take advantage of opportunity through the active engagement of our countries and the achievement of results. Now, just giving you an idea of where we are. With the advent of the triple phenomena of globalization, liberalization, and rapidly evolving information and communication technology, that we are transitioning the world from an industrial one based on manufacturing and goods into a knowledge and based on services and innovation. It became clear that there was a missing level of integration required to bridge, on the one hand, the sub-regional level of integration for issues requiring minimal economies of scale, but intimate levels of trust could be managed, and on the other, the global multilateral level where transnational challenges could be discussed and general policies agreed upon. But the true operational efficiency is difficult due to the unwieldy number of countries with widely varying realities that would be involved. I'm about to finish, so don't worry. I know that some of you are kind of tired. That missing bridging level of integration was the regional level. Latin America, Caribbean regional integration movements were required that could fill the gap between the operations and development efforts of the smaller but deeper sub-regional groupings of ACS, CARICOM in the English-speaking Caribbean, CARIFORUM in the Middle, SICA and CIECA amongst the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, and the largest hemispheric and global groupings, principally the OAS, ACP, and of course the UN. Enter stage left, new regional players, the ACS, and not long thereafter, CELAC. Okay, the one would operationalize development through cooperation, the other would facilitate development through political dialogue. And this is just a thought. We're not advocating right now a path or paving a way. We're just looking at what's going on right now. It should come out of the strategic planning exercise that we are planning to do, because this is what is happening right now. Now, the challenge remains how and with what resources to implement. Again, everything in strategic planning is really about implementation. In May 2025, under the chairmanship of Colombia, Greater Caribbean leaders, Masters of Medicine, will take a key step in perfecting the medicine and its delivery, investing in a strategic planning exercise which will ideally employ scenario planning, that I'm going to explain a little bit later, as a tool to contemplate alternative realities with the risk, but also teaming with commensurate alternative solutions that engender regional resilience. The world has gone from strategic planning to scenario planning. And the reason for that is because everybody found that strategic planning was looking at the past to predict the future. And the reality of this is that the future cannot be predicted. Okay? So what we have is really to stop thinking about looking at the future from the rear view mirror and start looking at scenario planning as a way to build strategy. So the premise is the future from the present is not one alone. The future can be influenced. So what you really need to know is the drivers that can influence the future and have strategies for different scenarios. That's the new way forward. Because, and this was mentioned or said, I don't know how many years ago, no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. Okay? But, of course, in times of change, it's learners who inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. Thank you very much. And this is an add-on. This is an add-on. Anytime that you talk about strategy, the reasons why strategy fail, ineffective or lack of resources, lack of support from patrons, having the wrong people in the leadership position, ineffective risk management, or vague strategic goals. So when you're looking at organizations that are not good at implementing, go back to the basics. Thank you.
I'm happy we get a second round of applause because I was going to ask us to do that. This was brilliant and intriguing. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for this presentation. I'm not surprised at all because I heard you at a seminar, a hybrid seminar we had on the Caribbean-China connection in collaboration with Arthur Logjak and the Chinese Embassy. And I was amazed at your presentation on logistics, regional transportation infrastructure. And again, I am just in awe at the concrete recommendations and proposals you have given to us. I am definitely one who supports, and that resonates with me a lot. And I have written not a whole article about it, but at least mention it in an article on regional integration, that we need a complementary strategy and model of regional integration. Beyond the neoliberal model, we need infrastructural integration. So that really resonates with me. Ambassador, I'm just pleased to see how you went back to the background document, the report of the West Indian Commission, to show how the ACS emerged, and you took the care to provide us with the context and the background and the developments that really shaped, and how you challenge us to go back and evaluate and assess. And that is what we need to do to see what we have achieved and what were the, what are the gaps and what it is that we need to do. And you generally, you gave us the strategies and exactly how the roadmap to do it. We really, really thank you for that, Ambassador. Before I open the floor to questions, I just needed to say that. Thank you so much again. And yes, let us do it again. So we have questions. Can you please, we have two questions in the front. There is a mic, but we could take it from the stand and just hand it over to, oh, okay. Ambassador will go to the mic. We will take two or three questions.
Okay, so Fernando Nogales and the Ambassador of Spain. So, Secretary, there are two concepts that seems to me that are seems to be like the enemies of integration, and one is sovereignty, and the other one is ideology. So, sovereignty, and I would like to know your views, given that you come from Panama, that is a country that was very many decades of its independence under the shadow of the U.S., and you led the transition from in the Panama Canal into becoming a fully fledged autonomous organization. That's one. And concerning ideology, I don't know whether what you are constantly talking about functional cooperation. The continent is riven by deep ideological confrontation. So I wonder whether, looking to the future, the ACS could be more effective through reducing the scope of things that it can achieve.
Yeah, we'll take
Great.
one or another one, and two more, and then we will turn to you, Ambassador, to respond.
I would like to
Okay.
return the
That's-
question.
okay.
Return the question, because I don't think that there is a region that was so different between sovereign states as the what became the European Union. So I would like to hear from you.
Yeah, well,
How you were able to achieve that, because
no,
to us, that would be kind of an example to follow, but we do have the same thing that the European Commission had 40 years ago.
okay, so first, I think that the situation in the European Union is not by any means perfect, and whoever reads the letter and the Draghi reports, where all the good things that the internal market has achieved, but all our deficits. So there are many deficits, even if we are the grouping that has achieved, let's say, for the time being, the state of art of integration. That's important.
But you have
No, but on the other hand, yeah,
more
but with
differences
hindsight,
in
yeah, but
culture, language,
but-
currencies, everything.
yes, no, but with hindsight, let me tell you that to begin with, there was a extremely traumatic experience that was two Second World Wars, and don't forget that after the Second World War, there were 60 million people involved in all the population transfer. 60 million people. So it's a phenomenon that a lot of people forget, that it was not a peaceful process. So I think that, and that's very important. And I could talk to you about that. And well, but let me, that if you look at the fathers of the European movement, all of them came from peripheral regions in their own countries. They all could speak German, but they were negotiating in French, and they could all speak English. It's a very funny thing. So I think that's very important. For countries like mine, that was not an original member, the belief that we were part, that our history was within Europe, was a phenomenal importance. And for the countries of Eastern Europe, the perception that communism has been a total ruin was acute. And however negative people consider the neoliberal model, the achievement of those countries by embracing kind of, at least partially, that model, well, it's phenomenal. If you look at how was Poland 30 years, or Slovakia, or the Czech Republic 30 years ago after the fall of communism, and where do they stand? it's phenomenal. So, well,
No, thank you for the
because
explanation,
possibly because sovereignty is a word that they don't cherish. Huh? I could do the analogy that about another concept I will not mention that is very common in biology and personal relationships. But okay, everybody mentioned, but that's why I will not mention it by name. And then the other thing is ideology. I think is people, the leaders are ready to give up part of ideology, working toward a shared future. So I think but that could be a long discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador, Secretary General. I must leave soon. That's also why I took the microphone ahead. So I ask for your excuses. But thank you very much for such comprehensive, important. I echo your words, Doctor. I was amazed. I was completely dazzled at your wonderful presentation. And let me tell you, when I heard you talking, I couldn't but recall for the past 2 years that I've been listening to all your wonderful presentations in the various meetings that we have, that I was wondering how you were going to accommodate in 45 minutes all the knowledge that you have shared with us in 2 years. But I think that was in addition to the importance of the topic, an extraordinary summary. So I applaud you for that. While I was, well, I have a short comment that in a way has to do with the comments that you and Ambassador Fernando had, and I also congratulate you and thank you for the document, the historical document that give us a view of how the world has been changing. But one aspect that I capture of the many that you also pointed out for us is that CARICOM from the incept in 50 years ago in 1972, 73, it had a more precise goal of integration that you can see it reflected in that document, whereas the rest of the Latin American countries, not so much so. At the time, and it was only about 10 years after, probably 2003, 2004, with the coming of CELAC and so on, that we Latin Americans began to reinforce the idea of our union, our integration, and so on. So what I'm trying to say with this is that, yeah, it shows, it reflects the changing of times, but the essence and the importance of the organization, the Association of Caribbean States, in the sense that it brings together the ideals, the goals of, at the end of the day, as you mentioned, we live in one Caribbean sea, one Caribbean region with our own problems, and regardless of what the political concerns, the political systems, even the colonial legacies that we have, nonetheless, we live in the same area, in the same neighborhood, and even considering the discrepancies or differences in time, CARICOM being a longer body pursuing integration than perhaps Latin American countries, but we find ourselves together at the ACS, and I think that's a wonderful thing to cherish. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll just take one last question, but before I say that, I just want to acknowledge the presence of Cuba's ambassador who came in. I'm sure the weather kept him behind, as well as other special invited guests, and including Dr. LaGuardia, who's a senior lecturer here, the idea of this diplomatic dialogue, it was proposed by her and her mom, who's visiting Professor Milagros from Havana, University of Havana, as well as the Model UN Club. I just wanted to acknowledge you and all those who came after we started. It is just good to have everyone. So if we just have one more question, we will take that, and then if not, we will go to the vote of thanks. Okay, we have one question from Ambassador.
Oh, good afternoon. It's not a question, just a little commentary. Thanks for the invitation. Of course, we have to be here. Supposed to be early, but I apologize. For us, it's very important to take participation at this conference. As Ambassador mentioned, we taking or try to take in part a lot of try to be more activity inside the Association of Caribbean States. We try to doing our best in that matter, and we supported completely the work of the Association Caribbean States, close relationship with the association and involved on all history of the association. Just a little commentary. I don't know if the ideologies should be the main thing or more important thing to be considered as part of the work of the association. For me, in my understanding, that should be very complicated. I think that up to now, the work of the association demonstrated, according to my interpretation, that cooperation and other things are the main thing that we have to follow up. Anyhow, of course, we can mention or we can keep in mind ideologies, history, whatever, but I would like to highlight the importance of cooperation, first of all, as part of the work of the association. I know that you was trying to increase the cooperation and the participation of all countries, even members and associated members and international organizations to make deeper and wider cooperation to obtain any results. I believe that we will continue this way, but I just wanted to mention that I don't know if ideologies should be even considered like part of analysis. Thank you so much.
Ambassador, for that intervention. Pragmatism, cooperation being at the forefront. On that note, I call on Mrs. Cheyenne Lee to deliver the vote of thanks for this event this afternoon. Mrs. Lee? Ambassador, thank you so much. And I welcome you to have a seat next to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to all. It has been such an honor to be part of this memorable occasion that is celebrating 30 years of the ACS. It is a privilege to propose the vote of thanks to conclude this event. First and foremost, I would like to thank His Excellency Rodolfo Sabonge, Secretary General, Association of Caribbean States, for his insightful presentation and deep insights on the ACS's journey of 30 years and the future prospects. I thank our IIR Secretariat, particularly Ms. Tanisha Childs, and team for administrative management of this event. We are grateful for the ACS staff. Special thanks to Mrs. Patricia Phillip, Conference and Protocol Officer at the ACS, for all her assistance. We express our deepest gratitude to Mrs. Dion Spears and NGL team for the splendid display on the ACS. We thank the U.W.I Marketing and Communications for promotional assistance, U.W.I Campus Security for ensuring our safekeeping. We thank Holiday Snacks for their gracious sponsorship of snacks at today's event. And of course, thank you to Dr. LaGuardia for proposing this event. I express my appreciation to the in-person and online audience for their participation, support, and interest in the IIR and its activities. As this is the last event for the academic year, a heartfelt thanks to Dr. Montoute for her oversight and overall leadership of IIR's public events. You are welcome to join us for refreshments at the back of the room, where the conversation can continue. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Well,
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
there were thanks to a lot of people. I'd like to thank our staff who really helped put this together in 2 days. Uh, First of all, of course, Trisha, Jake, Claudia, Joshua. Am I missing somebody? That was quite a challenge because, well, we have been invited to several others. One of the things I was discussing with Trisha is that because we have been traveling so much, that we had to do this as we came back. But we're going to make it better. We're going to offer it in Mexico. Already invited us to do something in the university, also in the academic environment. We would welcome the invitation from Venezuela or Dominican Republic or Cuba, because I think that this is part of the legacy of the association. And we are also going to be writing an article, an indexed article, because it is part of the diplomatic history of the region. Thank you.
Just thank you very much again for your collaboration, Ambassador, and the ACS for this event. Thank you so much, everyone.